One day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake, so the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we are going to drown." Jesus got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided. All was calm. "Where is your faith?" he asked them. When I was contacted by Sarah Marks, the executive director of the Franciscan Federation, about sharing some thoughts with your organization regarding the future of religious life and the possibility of allowing for the development of new forms of membership, my first thought was, say no. Let someone else jump into the teeming waters of the types of changes your Franciscan congregations and institutes, the entire Federation, are undergoing. But then Francis, or perhaps Claire, or some other Franciscan saint pulled me aside by the collar and told me I should accept the invitation. So, for better or worse, here I am. First, a word about me. I'm a member of the Order of Friars Minor, living in Loudonville, New York, at Siena Franciscan College. I'm currently working on developing a new Laudato Si Center for Integral Ecology with another friar, Brother Yatsik. We are working with some of the 22 Franciscan colleges and universities in the United States and are reaching out to 5 other Franciscan study centers, most in the global South, to create an international Franciscan network on Laudato Si integral ecology. This comes after having lived and worked in Rome for 12 years, mostly as a domestic servant, and prior to that, a number of years prior to that, living in the global South, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Returning for a moment to the gospel text of St. Luke, I would like to highlight several key elements. But first, I want to read an interesting commentary from another source, something some of you might recognize. It is a description of a type of a boat in which some modern disciples have decided to live out their discipleship in the Lord Jesus by following the example of St. Francis, St. Clare, and other great witnesses in the Franciscan family. I quote, "The Franciscan Federation is an ever-evolving group of Franciscans who seek to deepen the understanding and love of the Franciscan movement in our world today through collaborative relationships across the Franciscan world." This prophetic statement continues, "The Federation promotes the exploration and study of Franciscan evangelical life and its implications for our world today, provides networking opportunities and resources to further ignite Franciscan values, and provides space for the emergence of new ideas, ever evolving. We are getting somewhere now, since the deepest truth about our Franciscan lives is that we belong to a movement that was from its very beginning lay-based, which means there are 2 operative identifiers in those words, lay-based movement. Both have creative difficulties. Over the course of the history, they've created difficulties to Franciscan institutions that became primarily religious or clerical. Another element of your statement, love of the Franciscan movement in the world today. The locus of this movement takes place in companionship, accompaniment with the poor and the excluded, with those suffering all forms of injustice, violence, the effects of climate change. I'm reminded of something that Thomas Celano talks about, "The world is my cloister," which points us in the direction of a perduring mystical stance we are called to embrace as faithful disciples of Jesus and followers of the gospel life proposed by St. Francis. Collaboration across the entire Franciscan family. We, your brothers in the First Order, recognize more and more the critical need for us to collaborate, to recognize one another as brothers and sisters sharing the same identity, the same calling, even in its distinct forms, the same mission, even if we sometimes pretend and insist that each of our unique approaches, replete with a history of misunderstanding and divisions, are irreplaceable. This is so far from the truth. Our specific histories and sensitivities should inspire us to move forward towards a shared center where we might embrace and encourage one another in the living out of our vocational calling that is very fundamentally very difficult if it is lived and embraced according to the demands that it makes on each of us. The gospel demands the likes of the Magnificat, providing space for the emergence of holy newness, creative ideas, new ways of imagining and living out the gospel life we have embraced. There is only so much space in the trillions of galaxies, no matter how hard that might be to imagine. At least that is what we can say if we stick to current understandings of energy and mass. Perhaps there are spaces that go beyond these mutually agreed scientific theorems and conceptions. Sister Ilia Delio, someone well known to your federation, following the thought of Teilhard de Chardin and others, suggested there might be frontiers of consciousness for which we lack conceptual frameworks. Why might this be significant? Because when we speak about emergencies of holy, the emergence of new holiness, of creativity, of new forms of imagining, we oftentimes try to drag these yet to be understood or accepted ideas back into a framework with which we feel more comfortable and secure. I do not want to say anything more about this point here, since it takes us into the realm of consciousness for which I do not even have a language, let alone an intelligible way to describe in simple and understandable ways what this means. Suffice to say, when we are presented with new ideas, oftentimes we do one of three things. Number one, we pretend we did not hear or do not understand what is being proposed. Number two, argue from tried and true traditions saying it has never before been done this way, thus discounting it without creating space for a holy newness. Or three, we take a courageous step and open ourselves to that which we have never thought of or tried to do up to this point in our lives, something that will make demands on us and carries the potential of leading to a radical rethinking, even restructuring of our presuppositions, and God knows of our structures. Let's return for a moment to your amazing statement of identity, purpose, direction, commitment, and a demonstrable willingness to move as the Spirit moves in new directions. Knowing religious life as I do, having had some prior experience, both personal and from the position of leadership, and having had the opportunity to accompany some privately vowed individual laity, I am sure not all of your member Franciscan congregations, associate member communities, and individual members fully understand or embrace all the elements contained in the statement of identity and purpose of the Franciscan Federation, at least that which I have read on your website. On the one hand, it's natural that some individuals, even organizations, Franciscan congregations, feel threatened by one or other of the elements that you list there. Change does not happen all at once, nor should it. Change requires time, discernment, perseverance, a willingness to undergo interior and institutional transformation, conversion. This is true of all organizations, and it demands much patience, much willingness to listen and listen and listen. Let's go back to the boat on the Lake of Galilee for a moment, if you're ready for a ride. If you ever have sailed on this lake, you gain an interesting perspective of the nature of conversion. The lake is quite small by many standards. It measures 13 miles roughly by 8 miles. It's situated in a deep valley. When the winds rise, they are often violent and can create significant squalls. Applying this to what takes place when people are confronted by change, sometimes it is the smallest of things that set off the largest of reactions. I remember once a fraternal Franciscan First Order fraternity that had many members, many friars. Someone wanted to introduce some modifications to the way the community prayed, the daily office. Several friars reacted violently and withdrew from community prayer and refused to go back. On a larger scale, I remember several cases where contiguous provinces, those situated geographically, culturally, even linguistically, one next to the other, refused to collaborate with the other provinces where people shared a common language, a national, even cultural identity in the same country, but who did not believe that the other friars in the neighboring provinces lived Franciscan life in an authentic manner. In one situation, the candidates to the order were required to learn another language in order to participate in the formation program conducted according to their understanding of Franciscan life, that province, but in another country. They had to leave their country when they had possibilities within their own country to share resources and to do it together. They gave little thought to how difficult it was for a candidate to enter deeply into the formative process through the lens of another language, culture, set of understandings, not even to mention the food and smells and everything else that go with that. Luke's gospel story, while appearing to be about Jesus' power to master the elements, is really a story about the difficulty of entering into a new vision of life, of accepting change as something capable of helping us reimagine our Franciscan gospel way of life. The disciples feared that which they refused to acknowledge, namely that life is about change. It's about taking risks, stepping out of one's comfort zone for the sake of God and God's people, crossing troubled waters to come to a new space where life is reimagined and where it is understood, experienced, and lived differently. Fear is a natural reaction to unnatural or unfamiliar events and situations, to the wild and uncontrollable squalls that toss the ship about, creating the sensation that too much movement and the ship will sink, taking all those within it with it. However, ships are built with incredible resilience. It is not the ship most of the time that is the primary threat. It is those conducting it, those who are riding in the ship. They are the ones who have the greatest difficulty thinking about surviving to the next shore. If it is any consolation, your brothers in all of the first orders, and I would dare to venture our sisters of the second order, the Poor Clares, in all their diversity, the Conceptionist sisters, are also in boats that are somewhat floating on the same lake as your member organizations and individuals. There is so much change, or need for change, present among the friars and the institutions of the First Order. And there is so much fear and resistance to the squalls the Spirit of God is provoking to wake us up so that we might wake up the world, as Pope Francis told us in November 2013. I'm reminded of an article I read last year while taking time off in Alaska on the Yukon River among the Athabascan people, the indigenous tribal groups. My way of undergoing detox after my many years of service in Rome. The article appeared in a publication of the International Union of Superior Generals, June 2019 General Conference. The following words struck me forcefully. Religious life finds itself today in a situation of deep searching, of creativity and pruning. The Spirit who dwells within us continually quenches our thirst with water from the fountain that is always replenished. We are drawn and inspired by a love which calls us to fill situations of darkness with prophetic light and to dwell courageously in new horizons. The future of religious life, and I would add Franciscan life, lies in living fully our mystical yearning with our traditional calling to prophecy. Living our mystical yearning with our traditional calling to prophecy. I'm not a natural mystic. However, I, like most human beings, have experienced mystical events, moments things that pulled the moorings out from under me, but did not cause me to fear for my life or my stability, mental or other. Or some people would say my mental stability is already in question. What is particular about mystical events is that they are unexpected. They are reassuring, even if troubling. And they reveal something new about life. They are interconnected. They lay bare the unity or interconnectedness of all living and non-living things. They expose our limitations, our sinfulness, our need for conversion and healing. Mystical experiences provide a backdrop and a foreground upon which all of the singular events in a person's life might be placed, viewed, where the individual parts are seen for what they are, part of a unified and unifying wholeness into which we are being called, drawn, towards which we are heading. The point of mystical experience is that it allows us to look beyond the singular, which we see more clearly thanks to a mystical encounter, and to see it as it participates in the unity of all other moments of life, all other dimensions. Sorry to get so philosophical, but I believe one of the limiting factors that prevents us from moving forward when presented with too much change at once, or with different and unfamiliar actors who pretend to have insights into the Franciscan ways of life that appear to be different than our time-tested and proven ways of living it, is our unwillingness to step back, call upon God's wisdom, open ourselves to a mystical-like experience. When we step back, when we suspend our judgment, when we allow new forms and expressions of the Franciscan charism space to breathe and move within us individually and within our institutions, we open ourselves to the possibility to undergo a process of maturation, transformation, and new integration. Oblate theologian Ron Rolheiser, well known, speaks about the challenges we confront when we do not place all events in our lives, individual and I would add institutional, before the larger or infinite horizon. To be fair, I should quote Rolheiser properly. This is what he writes: "Our lives are better understood and more peacefully lived when they are viewed against the horizon of eternity, against an afterlife. I believe this fundamental insight applies to the case of change that you are confronting, that all of us are confronting. When we place singular events within the lives of our institutions or at the individual level into a larger framework or perspective of what actually is and what might become, somehow each of these commingle with each other, inform each other, push each other forward. When we place our cherished traditions and life ways of living the gospel life before the infinite love and mercy of God, we might discover how relative most of our traditional practices and forms really are, which means it opens us up to the possibility for change, new ways of imagining how we live out the infinite love and mercy of God through our lives, shared together in community, and expressed in our mission to the world, our prophetic mission to the world. I've come to believe that this was Francis of Assisi's way of conversion, progressively gaining a capacity to place all life experiences within the framework of an interconnected, sacred, love-created and love-destined existence. As John Duns Scotus might argue, love is the defining and unifying meaning of all that exists, the fundamental reason for the incarnation. From another perspective, I actually think that Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si expresses this mystical intuition that I am highlighting. It is this mystical intuition that is at the heart of his understanding of the nature of what he calls an integral ecological conversion. It is only when we begin to perceive the interconnectedness of all things that we slowly come to recognize the unity of all creatures. This takes us to the heart of St. Francis's insight into how the kingdom of God is to be lived and experienced in our current consciousness, our reality, as fraternitas, as brotherhood, sisterhood, brother sun, sister moon. In effect, the Canticle of the Creatures, aside from being a literary breakthrough for the Italian language, reveals the interrelatedness of all things living and non-living. When we begin to recognize that which unites us at the deepest levels of life, when we yield our desire to remain locked into our petty tribal groups, ethnic, regional, cultural, national, religious, and recognize that we belong to the one family of the creative and loving God, it is then, I believe, our capacity to imagine and welcome begins to change. Resistance slowly is replaced by curiosity, a keen interest to learn something new, a willingness to recognize common bonds expressed in a variety of ways and forms. Slowly, a new understanding of our own traditional or habitual ways of seeing and living and doing Franciscan gospel life begins to take root in our hearts, our minds, and if we allow it, in our institutions. The we just keeps getting bigger, more inclusive, more diverse, more unified. One other biographical note that might help explain my lunacy. I'm a cultural anthropologist by formation. My natural inclination for discovery and crossing borders, cultural, linguistic, at the level of consciousness, has been strengthened by my cultural and my educational background. I'm interested in entering into the fray of different human ways of thinking, perceiving, acting, and organizing. My first reaction to difference is an intellectual desire to understand and, to one degree or another, to find a way to enter into the experience of that which I am encountering, the experience of the other. Curiosity does not always kill the cat. It confuses and might even be deeply troubling. But at the same time, curiosity is a source of incredible creativity, a doorway towards that which participates more fully in the experience of the infinite horizon. I remember on several occasions I encountered individuals and small groups of women and men who had embraced different external forms of religious life, somehow connected to the Franciscan story and movement. Given my previous job description, I could not spend any time with these fellow sojourners and seekers. At the same time, I resisted all temptation to look down on them, to demean them for what most clearly was a desire on their part to embrace the way of Jesus, according to their image of the person, message, and mission of Francis of Assisi. I can now say that we OFMs are not the only ones trusted with the incredible spiritual and intellectual heritage of Francis of Assisi and the movement that was born from his God-human creation encounter and mystical insights. In fact, I found myself sometimes embarrassed and called to a radical rethink of my way of living the gospel life to which I had made life commitment. While some of our more recent groups seeking to embrace the gospel life, these new forms, gospel life of Francis, understood through their life experience that might be a need for conversion in some other areas, their desire to live a simpler life, expressive of absolute trust in divine providence and total self-giving for the sake of suffering humanity. It's edifying and even troubling. It demands something of me. One amazing example is found in Brazil. A former diocesan priest from his youth desired to follow closely the footprints of Christ proposed by St. Francis of Assisi. Because of family circumstances, he was not allowed to join the friars. He did become a diocesan priest. Later in life, when those life circumstances changed, he was free to pursue his vision of Franciscan life, his first love, as he described it. He founded an institute of Franciscan religious brothers and sisters whose example of piety, devotion, and loving service to the poorest of the poor along the Amazon River basin and elsewhere are recognized by all the church and beyond. Their Franciscan witness to the gospel caught the attention of Pope Francis during his visit to Brazil for the World Youth Day. They also caught my attention. They referred to me as their minister general and servant, something that was certainly not canonical or official. I was humbled by their deep spirituality, their closeness to the poor and to marginalized brothers and sisters, and by their simplicity of life. They are, for me, genuine Franciscans, an example to all other members of this incredible movement of what God is seeking to do if we open our lives to walk together, walk with Christ, walk with humanity, walk with creation. Someone once asked me whether these brothers in Brazil should or could not be admitted to the Order of Friars Minor. I perceive behind this simple question a certain entitlement mentality or sense of superiority, as if our way of life were the only true and authentic form, and all other expressions are somewhat less valuable. Funny, you can imagine what my response was. Why would they want to be admitted to the order? They are living an authentic, life-giving, gospel-based Franciscan way of life that is inspiring and challenging to us and to all other members of the movement and beyond. Why would they join an international religious order only to lose some of the freedoms they experience that allow them, unlike us sometimes, to keep moving? I know the brother who asked the question. He was someone who held a position of authority in his province, and I can tell you he was not pleased with my response. There is one other matter we must address, or even two. First, this matter has to do with our capacity and our responsibility to share the Franciscan charism we have received with others, even if they decide to live it in a different manner, as was the case with the example from Brazil, the Franciscan brothers who have begun a new life form based on the radical desire of Francis to live in simplicity, following the gospel, close to the poor, faithful to each other in fraternity. I'm reminded of a visit I made to the OFM province in the Netherlands. At the time of my visit, there were approximately 120 friars. Their average age was 79, 78. A significant number of the friars lived in some form of senior living arrangement. Does this sound familiar to some of the member institutions of the Federation? There was, however, a small group of friars who were convinced that God was not yet finished with Franciscan life in their country and their context. While they could have decided to prepare to close up shop and allow Mother Nature to run her course, they undertook a process of discernment and renewal that led them to a very different place. They refused to do what could have been allowed to them to die spiritually, fraternally, and evangelically in their mission, their pastoral outreach. And while it is true because of their life, because they had to reduce energy and personnel, they were forced to reduce their workload and presences. They had enough energy left to engage in a process of spiritual, fraternal, and missionary renewal. This led to a refounding of several significant and meaningful fraternities. They changed the way they related to one another. They opened their fraternities and apostolic missionary engagements to laity, especially to young adults who were invited to come and spend extended periods of time living together with the brothers. They created a new fraternity where Franciscan religious brothers and sisters, secular Franciscans, second order Poor Clares, could live together. Obviously, they had quarters that were separated, but they could live together under one roof and share a common life. The net effect of this experience was a revitalization of energy, not only for those who were directly involved, but for the participating other entities that were involved, for the laity, for the youth. Out of this process of renewal, God graced the OFM brothers with several new vocations, something that the province had not seen for the previous 20 years prior to undertaking this renewal process. Other young people continued to come to them to experience a place where they could explore life's meanings, their own vocational journey, participate in an amazing experience of life producing life. New ideas and experiences were cultivated. Old reflections and methods were brought together through fraternal space. So that it wasn't just throwing out the old, it was actually using the old, but not being conditioned and controlled by it, creating a space allowing for oldness and newness to meet, embrace, and undergo renewal and conversion. In a certain sense, I believe what the brothers and sisters, together with non-affiliated associates, were able to do was to allow that which has been at the heart of the Franciscan movement from the very beginning, to allow the uncontrollable, untamable squalls of the Spirit of God that continue to disturb and move, sometimes forcefully, to move our institutions, to rock our boats, requiring us to renew the most fundamental dimensions of our relationship with the Lord of life, Jesus, with the demands of gospel living, requiring us also to plunge ourselves anew into all who and that God loves, humanity and all of creation as it is, not as we would hope for it to be, to love it, participate with it in a process of mutual healing, a journey, much like the leper embrace that transformed the lives of both Francis and the leper, the embracer and the embraced. What this might mean for the future of all of our Franciscan institutions and federations, only God knows, and she isn't talking. Return to a moment to your vision statement cited earlier in this reflection. The Franciscan Federation is an ever-evolving group of Franciscans who seek to deepen the understanding of love of the Franciscan movement in our world today through collaborative relationships across the Franciscan family. The Federation promotes the exploration and study of Franciscan evangelical life and its implications for our world today, provides networking opportunities and resources to further ignite Franciscan values, and provides a space for the emergence of new ideas. What is at stake in this process? Is the Franciscan charism at risk of being lost or so radically transformed that it simply loses its capacity to speak, to invite, to transform? I don't think so. The movement's past, its present and future, are not ours to dictate. They belong to St. Francis, the one who St. Francis has identified as the Minister General of all the movement, the Holy Spirit. Perhaps what is at stake in this process is us, our maniacal, incredible desire to control and keep hold of the narrative, to keep change to a minimum. Perhaps we also fear losing control over the process and the actors who will shape the Franciscan narrative as we move into uncharted waters, the future. We might comfort ourselves by thinking that new generations of followers of the gospel life proposed by Francis of Assisi will simply adopt our script, conform to our ways, most certainly tried and true, thus guaranteeing, at least in our tiny minds, that the charism and the heritage will live on. What we fear most is that our boats might be shaken and pushed in directions we dare not go. Dare not because we are not prepared or willing to move in these directions. Your vision statement moved me to return to words spoken by St. Francis as he lay naked on the ground, surrounded by his band of brothers, preparing for his death. The year or two prior to his death, St. Francis began working on his testament. We know that in this touching document, Francis tells the story of his conversion, his coming to a fresh and life-giving experience of the living God of the gospel, Jesus, his discovery of the face of God in the embrace and kiss of a leper, his journey with brothers and sisters along the way of living the gospel, doing it, and then deciding what they were learning along the way and changing as they went, of his radical conviction that the way revealed by the Most High God, expressed in the final document, the rule and life, which was developed in a lengthy fraternal and synodal process, must serve as a permanent point of reference for organizing the Franciscan gospel life, at least for us, his brothers, but also the Third Order have their own rule. This final propositum, or forma vitae, Francis was convinced was revealed by the Most High God and should serve as a magna carta for determining that which could be judged to be an authentic response and form for living the gospel life. Brothers and sisters, the Testament reveals how difficult it was even for Francis to let go and allow God to work new wonders and allow for new ideas and forms for living the gospel life to emerge. But God broke in the Spirit through another squall. In death, we know from the closing verses of the Canticle of Creatures, Francis realized one last time the temptation to which he was exposed. His attempt to try to control the life of the movement, the lives of the brothers and sisters who would come after him. As he lay naked before his brothers, the Creator God, naked even before the mice that tortured him by their lack of respect for his physical condition, Francis ultimately surrenders everything to God. This included all those sisters and brothers who did and who would come to follow the gospel life according to his example. And he says, "The Lord has shown me what was mine to do. May the Lord show you what is yours." Through these words, Francis sets free all of his followers, current and future, all of us, allowing us, like what occurred in the life of Francis, together with his companions, with the poor Clares and the poor ladies, with the lay penitents, to pursue freely the movement of the Spirit through the gospel life, seeking always to discover and act on the holy will of the Most High God. I believe that in the deepest recesses of his heart and his spiritual experience, his mystical experience, Francis understood that God moves continuously, creatively, in different ways, even novel ways. The winds blow where they choose, and you hear the sound of them, but you do not know from where they come or where they are going. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. Cited from the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 8. The life and movement that emerged from the shared experiences of Francis and all who joined him on the evangelical journey reflects the spirit of the gospel text from St. John that's cited above. But how do we continue in the same spirit as Francis? How do we continue to allow the Spirit to move and to lead us in new ways without us trying to jump off ship? Let's turn for a moment to the question of handing on the spiritual legacy of Francis. How we are going to do this? Clearly, a critical element in all of what I've been speaking about is the question of our commitment to share the rich spiritual and intellectual legacy of the Franciscan movement in a non-ideological, open, and responsible manner. For this, we must be willing to commit resources, human and financial. We must invest in the ongoing intellectual development of our rich, humanistic, spiritual, theological, and practical Franciscan heritage. What an incredible gift we could make by contributing scholars and dollars to such institutions as the Franciscan School of Theology, support to our Franciscan colleges and universities, investing in Franciscan scholarships and Franciscan scholars, these types of programs that could be created or that exist already. Many of your institutions already are providing opportunities for lay collaborators to experience formation in things Franciscana, encouraging them to go on pilgrimages to our holy places in Assisi, Laverna, Greccio, Cortona, Rome, to name a few. We also need to continue to provide Franciscan opportunities to the younger generations, X, Y, Z, the new Alpha, encouraging them to meet Francis of Assisi and to creatively embrace his values. Efforts in this direction could support scholars and dollars, programs and institutions that promote not only St. Francis's spiritual and humanistic vision, but also those of Pope Francis, who, to my mind, is making a singular contribution to sharing the vision of St. Francis through a refreshing, if not challenging, hermeneutical development of our rich tradition. This is most evident in Pope Francis's witness of life, evident in his reaching out to the poor, the marginalized, forgotten, evident through his promotion of dialogue, social friendship, peace, solidarity, forgiveness, evident through his deep respect and care for creation and efforts to promote an ecological conversion in the hearts of all, each of us included. Francis of Buenos Aires is allowing the light of the hope found in the life of Francis of Assisi to shine anew, casting out darkness and despair and allowing the healing light of hope to penetrate and transform all people and all events in history. This is what the interconnectedness is about. This is what that mystical insight, that vision is. It brings things together. It opens space. It allows for holy newness. Viewed from this hermeneutical lens, an ecological one, it makes sense also for our Franciscan institutions to invest in those activities engaged in the defense and care for all that God loves, humanity and the created universe. Franciscans International, Franciscan Action Network, collective Franciscan actions of our entire family, each of these provide us with two other opportunities for expressing our commitment to the passing on of the spiritual legacy entrusted into our hands and our institutions. Investing in these Franciscan forms, these outward signs, represents a concrete way for us to support and promote the ongoing development of our Franciscan gospel life and its role in service to the human family and the created universe today, tomorrow, into the future. A non-Franciscan writer reflecting on religious life argues that the future of religious life is ecological. She's not talking about religious life becoming a green party or movement. Rather, she points us toward the fullness of the mystical experience that shaped St. Francis's vision and mission, namely the coming to a consciousness and awareness of a way of life that is fundamentally relational. This life way, the way of the gospel that Francis embraced and to which he continues to invite each of us, flows outward from the Trinity community of relational love. It flows through the life veins of historical experience of humanity and the created worlds, pluriverses, by way of relationship. And it flows towards, back into, if you will, the heart of the triune God, a relational God who is our destiny, the unifying force of love at the heart and soul of all that exists. This understanding of a relational everything should inform and guide all processes of restructuring and revitalization. It should also encourage and inspire us to plunge ourselves anew into this amazing Franciscan movement. I close with the thought by an Irish theologian, Dermot O'Murchan, who shares a reflection on the challenges confronting religious life today. He writes, "The future of religious life is not for us to invent. That is the divine prerogative, but one we can anticipate co-creatively. We do so by befriending in a more discerning way the decline and death of the old model, by courageously risk-taking with new experiments, and by embracing with deeper wisdom the new world order struggling to unfold all around us, and I might even add, struggling to unfold all within us." My dear brothers and sisters, may Christ teach you what is yours to do. Peace be with you.